Hi, and welcome back to another edition of the Indusoft Web Studio video training series for version 7.1. In this video, we're going to show you how to connect to a Microsoft SQL Server database, or in this case, Microsoft SQL Server Express, and pull data from an existing database, or one that was created outside of Indusoft Web Studio. So let's show you what we're going to cover here. So we're going to go in and change the default database configuration that we set up in the previous video to connect to Microsoft Access. And if you haven't watched that video, I'd suggest that you do, because at the part of that video you will see some other things that are mentioned that are not just specific to connecting to a Microsoft Access database. So after we're done changing the default database configuration, we're going to create a brand new Microsoft SQL Server Express database and put some data into it using the management tool provided by Microsoft. And then we're going to go ahead and configure the grid object, a new grid object on the training application that we've created, and pull that data from that database into the grid object. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we get started here, I am going to go and create a new database and put some data into it. So I'm going to open up Microsoft SQL Server Express, SQL. I'm going to open up the SQL Server Management Studio Express Edition. It's one with the little icon that has the database and the little tools here. Now this will allow us to connect to the database and manage that. Now I'm using Microsoft SQL Server Express 2005. You can use 2008, and as I understand it, 2012 is out now too. I'm going to connect to this database using this here. I'm going to use the SQL Express as a name, and also notice here I'm going to use the Windows authentication, and that will show up later on. So just remember that that's how I'm connecting here. So I'll connect to this SQL Server that I have on my local PC. You can see that I have several databases. I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new database. I'm going to just right click on that, say new database, and in here I'm going to call this training DB, and go ahead and click on OK. If you click on add, it will add another one here. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to click on OK. Microsoft is asking me for some feedback. At this point I'm going to say no. Here in the training database that I just created, I'm going to expand that out, show you here that it's an empty database with no tables in it. I'm going to go ahead and right click and say new table, and once I have that table, I'm going to create 3 separate columns for this database. I'm going to create the machine, the uptime, and the downtime. So this will be machine, and the data type for that, I can choose numeric type, and I could use 10 characters, or we'll do the one that's up to 50 characters as well. I'll put uptime in here with no space, and I will make that an integer type. So just type the letter I, that'll take me to the I's, go integer, and then downtime, and that will also be an integer. Okay, so now that I have those columns created, I can right click here and save this table, and I'm going to call this table OEE for overall equipment effectiveness. Now normally you would have more information in this type of database, and it probably wouldn't be laid out like this, but I'm just trying to show you how to connect to it and get those different data types out of there. So once I've done this, I can close this, and then I can come over here to this view, right click, and open the table. Now I believe in 2008 and maybe even 2012 you're going to see something in here that says something like edit top 200 rows, or maybe top 1000 rows. So that's what you would use. In this edition, the 2005 edition, I'm going to open the table. You should see something like this. So if you do the edit top 200 rows or 1000 rows, you should see something like this. In here I'm going to give it a machine name. So the first one would be machine A, and the uptime, this one will be 90, maybe that's a percentage, and 10. Come over here to machine B, and we'll do 80-20, and the last one will be machine C, and we'll do 70-30 for that one. So just give you some different data in there. So that's 90, 80, 70, 10, 20, 30. Because I'm editing right in the live database, there's no need to save this. So I'm just going to close this table and minimize SQL Server Express Management Tool. And I'm going to go back into Indusoft Web Studio. This is a project that we have been running. At this point, you need to stop your project if you're going to edit the default database. I'm going to go into Project, options and go in here and change the default database. We were using the previously we were using not this one, but we were using the Access database engine. So for this video, we're going to change to the OLADB provider for SQL Server. Click on Next. And in this case, I'm going to enter in this field. This would normally be blank. I'm going to enter parenthesis local close parenthesis /SQL Express. Now this again would be blank normally. I did a test run before I started this video, and would normally be typing that in at this point. Also, the user security would be selected here, and because if you remember when I connected that database before, we were using the Windows authentication, so I'm going to switch this to Windows NT Integrated Security. Now that I have that connection, I want to refresh this and go down and point to that. No, first I need to refresh this and then select a database, and we don't have OEE in there. So let me go test that connection and try this one more time. Maybe I need to go back out and double check to see what I saved that as. So we'll go back in here, and we have the training database with the OEE table. So, as a training database, I'm not looking for the OEE table. I'm looking for the name of the database. So I need to select the name of that database. We'll test that connection. That's good. So I can connect to that SQL Server Express and write to that database. And now I'm okay with that. And okay. And now we'll step back out of this and go into the grid screen. And previously on the grid screen, we configured a data source for the class tag, and we configured another grid for the text file. So what we're going to do now is add a third one. And again, I did this in a test video, but I'm going to delete this and come back into graphics and create the grid object and put a new grid object on the screen. At this point, we're going to change this to database instead of text or class tag. Go to database, and now we can configure the data source settings. Now here's the provider that we just set up, or the connection string that we just set up in the project default. And in this case, I'm not going to automatically create a table, nor am I going to use the default name. So I can uncheck this and choose from the list. There's the table that we created with machine A, machine B, and machine C in it with those percentage values. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OEE there and choose that table. Click on OK. Now we have to go set up the columns, and the label that will appear at the top header of the grid object will be what's shown in the label field here. So we'll do machine, and the field is the column name that's within the database, and that was also machine 2, or machine also, I should say. And the type of that was text, because that's going to contain a string. And then we had uptime. The field was uptime, and that was an integer, and so I'll pull that down here, and you can see here that we have text, numeric, picture, and checkbox, which we had for the other data sources, but now we also have time, date, and date time. Uptime and downtime I set as integer, so those will be numeric. If you don't know what type to choose, it might be best to choose text. You have the best chance of getting some values out, but you really should go look and confirm what those types are. Whoops, I should need to set this at numeric. And the same for downtime. And also set that for numeric. So go ahead and click on OK at this point. And that's really all we have to do. At this point, I can connect to that database using that grid object. I'm going to save this screen and close it. And go ahead and run. And once I go to my grid screen here, I can see that I've already connected to that database, and I'm already pulling that data that I created with another source. It doesn't have to be created with the management tool. It could be from any other product dumping data into there. As long as I know the format of that, I can point to the right column names and get the right data out of that. I can also use this to write into here. So for example, I can put 1, 2, 3, and then drop down a line and put 4, 5, 6, and I can go back to my SQL Management Express here, right click, open table. You can see the new values of the data that I typed in there. So it's just that easy to configure with the different types of objects that are using the default database configuration. Look forward to the next video to find out how you can write your own SQL queries and statements and just get right into any database data that you need to. So hopefully you found this to be interesting and informative and learned something from it. And we appreciate your time and for checking out these videos. If you have any feedback, please send us an email at info@indusoft.com, and have a great day. Thanks.